When you think of a black woman or black women, what comes to mind? Bonjour, good afternoon. My name is Leith Sini. I'm from Georgia State University. I'm a doctoral student there, 5th year, hopefully graduating next year, all the way from the United States. I'm here, thank you so much, supported by my family in the back, my wonderful husband and my 3 sons and my mom. So that's my little toddler. That's you talking a little bit. I'm going to be sharing my study. I would not feel boxed in, a phenomenological study of black women's experiences with media portrayals to introduce Black pro-social media framework. This is a framework for counteracting negative stereotypes of African Americans in media, and specifically for my research, African American women. So I'm just going to provide a brief background of my study before I go into the theoretical frameworks I ground my study in. I will share my methods, findings, limitations, and how I plan to take my research further. So one very important aspect of this study is the quality of representations of African Americans in media in the United States. So presently there is an increase of the presence of African Americans in media. However, there is a need for better quality representation. And what I mean by quality is the prevalence of negative mediated stereotypes of African Americans in media. Another very important aspect when it comes to media effects is that most of the research focuses on white-centered audiences, meaning white attitudes towards black people and the negative consequences of that. And also how to reduce prejudice and discrimination, which is very important research. What we do know about black audiences is that media stereotypes have several harmful consequences among African Americans, not just intergroup conflicts. We also know that these consequences are even more harmful when they are produced by black content creators. So for example, picture here, you guys might know who Tyler Perry is. He's an American film television producer. He is recognized by audiences and researchers alike for perpetuating harmful stereotypes of African Americans in his work. We also know that counter-stereotypes can undermine the negative consequences of stereotypes in media. Additionally, African Americans are the most influential group when it comes to media popularity in the United States. We spend, not me personally, but we spend upwards of 81 hours a week across media, and that's about 31.8% more than the general population. So even more important, representation and quality in media. We also know that 67% of TV audiences, black TV audiences, according to Nielsen, want to see more representations of black people in media. They're also very critical of the negative depictions and see these depictions as very harmful to social status and to identity. So considering the background I just shared, that we need to see an increase of African Americans in media, that African Americans audiences are very critical of the type of depictions, and we need more research concerning black audiences. This is where my study comes in. So my research goals for my study is to empower the voices of African American women to discover what representations of themselves they want to see in US media. Additionally, ultimately, I'm taking this route to introduce Black pro-social media. This is a framework for counteracting negative stereotypes of mediated depictions of African Americans to produce more positive outcomes among African Americans. I also want to add that pro-social media framework in general can be used for researching and developing any stereotype group to produce and produce more positive content and depictions of that group. So the research questions that I asked to acquire these goals is really, again, what do African American women want to see in media? And how do they see these desired depictions impacting their lives? So I think first I want to take a little bit of time to explain the different types of media depictions, stereotypes, and counter-stereotypes. So in general, stereotypes are generalizations of individuals from groups. It focuses on a certain trait and ignores the other traits of humanity. In particular, when it comes to stereotypes of African Americans, they are rooted in American chattel slavery. They are used as tools to rationalize white oppression and to normalize social injustices such as racism, sexism, and poverty. And I talk about several mediated stereotypes in my paper, and I'm just going to discuss really one for the sake of time, which is a strong black woman. She's typically large, she's dark, she's considered unattractive, she's asexual because she's not allowed to be feminine like her white counterpart, and she's physically strong. That's where the focus is. She's a caretaker of everybody but herself because she is strong, because she can do it. She doesn't need any support. She's self-sacrificing because she has this amazing strength. And she's not allowed to be vulnerable and express her emotions because that wouldn't be strong, right? And so this stereotype has several harmful consequences, much like the Jezebel, which is a hypersexualized woman, the angry black woman, and the baby mama that takes advantage of men and government assistance by having babies unwed. So I talk about each of these, but I just want to provide a general overview of the negative, harmful impacts of stereotypes. And one is Stilling-Claude's stereotype threat. So individuals experiencing stereotype threat have the fear of being viewed through the lens of a stereotype, which can cause a decrease in the ability of in performance in the area where they typically might do well. Another harmful impact is embodiment theory by Levy, which suggests that individuals can actually take on that stereotype. It can cause a distorted sense of self-view. It could decrease cognitive performance and also lead to an increase of susceptibility to heart disease. Post-traumatic slave syndrome by Leary and Robinson, they propose that African Americans in particular can suffer from negative, harmful behavior patterns due to the traumatic legacy of slavery, and that stereotypes can cause low self-esteem, low sense of self-worth. It could cause a preference for Eurocentric physical attributes or colorism over darker skin and kinkier hair. So here I have an American rapper, Lil' Kim. This is a picture of her in the beginning of her career where she's more black, Afrocentric, and this is what she looks like currently, where she has transformed her physical appearance to look more Eurocentric. Also, stereotypes can cause fear of failure among African Americans. It can cause African Americans to feel jealous of others that are successful, and also decrease a sense of racial identity. Counter-stereotypes, on the other hand, as you guessed it, is opposite. They're oppositional views, depictions, and ideas of stereotypes. And one example here is, a literary example of this, is actually my mom's book, Francisco. She's actually in town promoting her book. For this, yes, congratulations, Mom. So we're doing this together. So the protagonist of this book is a Hollywood actress. She decides to leave Hollywood because she doesn't want to adhere to the hypersexualized version of a black woman by participating in the casting couch. She doesn't want to be forced to portray Eurocentric physical attributes in the characters anymore, and so she decides to leave and forge her own way in life. So counter-stereotypes, they place marginalized individuals and groups at the center of the narrative, meaning empowering their voices and their stories to be heard. They present oppositional perspectives, different ideas from the counter-stereotypes, more positive stories, and they undermine the negative consequences of stereotypes. Now, in my paper, I do talk about several other examples. For the sake of time, I just want to briefly go over some positive impacts that counter-stereotypes can have among African American audiences. And first is the increase of racial identity, the increase of cognitive ability and performance, aspirations among African American women to pursue leadership positions, and also decrease stereotype threat. So up to this point, I've talked a lot. I'm going to share the theoretical frameworks that I'm basing my study on. And first is Brown and Singhall's pro-social TV. They propose that pro-social TV, and this is the 1950s, and I'm going to say media, should be upheld in ethical standards that protect individual freedom, equality, dignity, physical well-being, and psychological well-being, and that also audiences have choice in the content they wish to engage in. They also ask, who decides who pro-social television, or in our case, media is, and how do you develop pro-social media? And I think that's where Africana studies, Africana Womanism comes in by Hudson Weems, who suggests that when you're doing research centered on African American women, then those voices need to be empowered, and the struggles and the desires of African women need to be acknowledged. She also suggests that racism needs to be, it needs to be acknowledged that racism does marginalize the experiences of African American women or African women of the diaspora. And because I am focusing on media, I'm also consulting Ramasabarian's and Bonjo's critical media effects. They suggest that media sustains and perpetuates racial attitudes and white oppression, but also audiences have agency. So this is where Black pro-social media comes in, and what I would like to add is that not only do audiences have media agency, but content creators have agency as well in the type of depictions they can perpetuate, especially in the digital age. So, what is a Black pro-social media leaf? Black pro-social media is content created by Black producers with Black representations that depict the desired emotions, behaviors, attitudes that are valued and desired by Black audiences. These depictions promote racial identity, promote increase of self-esteem, promote positive outlooks among African Americans. They protect and uphold equality, dignity, physical well-being, psychological well-being, and are determined by Black audiences. Which brings me to my study. How do you know what Black audiences want? Well, using a qualitative phenomenology study, you ask them. So in my intense semi-structured interview, I asked undergraduate students to doctoral students ranging from ages 18 to 60, about 55 years old. I also use a coding and theming process analysis to discover the emerging themes that arise from the data. So I got 5 minutes, so let's go. Themes. Black women, participants in the study, they want to see, believe it or not, stereotypes with positive portrayals, such as a single mom, but with a positive co-parenting relationship. They want to see many, this is not limited to this list. Black women having it all, married with children, supported by their husbands, enjoying singleness, and I'm going to go to the next slide. They also perceive that these depictions will improve their lives in so many ways. They will feel empowered to achieve positive influence on relationships, and you can see that. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I think really, what was really stood out to me is the theme of freedom, and not being boxed in. One participant said, I would feel less restricted in what I can do. I would feel like I have more options in life. I wouldn't feel boxed into going one pathway. I wouldn't feel overwhelmed or stressed. Let's talk about limitations. Now, media stereotypes is a global phenomenon, not limited to Black women and not limited to the United States. So future research, have at it. Also, Brown and Signals, they asked the question, how do you mitigate the unintended consequences of pro-social messages? I did not talk about that in my paper, but I do believe it deserves attention. Now, how am I taking this further? I'm going to put Black pro-social media into practice. I'm going to develop a music album developed by a Black woman producer, writer, and singer-songwriter that reflects desired depictions that my participants talked about, right? I'm going to use focus groups once the music is created to get their feedback. Did we create Black pro-social media? Also, I'm going to follow that up with quantitative experimental surveys to learn of the responses to the music by a broader audiences and learn of the attitudes and depictions. Now, in conclusion, I asked you, what comes to mind when you think of a Black woman? Don't answer that. There's no one way to describe a Black woman. Black women are not a monolith. Black women are diverse. They have their own lived experience, nuanced personalities, desires, and beliefs and lives. And the beautiful diversity of Black women need to be seen in media because representation truly does matter. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you so much.